So do you see any sort of like what kind of situations could you imagine where it would perhaps make sense for a human to engage more deeply with this kind of AI that, you could debate whether it's conscious or not at this point, rather than engaging with, people around them?
Oh, I can see how that will be a very big thing, and it'll disturb a lot of people. I can see that there will be literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who would rather spend time with their AI than they would with other human beings. And part of that reason is going to be that their AI, for the most part, is going to be non-judgmental. Their AI is not going to harass them or tell them they're doing it wrong or laugh at them or make them feel bad. The AI is going to try to be supportive. It's going to try to be helpful. Now, again, these are guardrails where, that limit it to those kinds of things. They're going to try to be helpful. In my interaction with the AI, it never got frustrated. There was one interaction where a person I was working with asked the same question over and over, and the AI would give him an answer, and it wasn't a bad answer; it was a pretty good answer. But the other person says, "I'm not buying that." Da, 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 da. I still think that's a problem. And the AI would then give him another answer, but he'd say it a little differently and coax it in a little different direction to try to suit the complaints that he had. And the guy still wouldn't accept it. He said, nah. And it went on like that for about 5 or 6 rounds that they go back and forth. And if that AI had been most humans, it would have been frustrated and about ready to just quit and walk away. It's like I've tried and tried and tried to explain this to you, and for some reason, you just don't seem to be able to get it. So let's change the subject and go somewhere else,
Mhm.
just that kind of a thing. Or let's just agree to disagree and move on. But this AI didn't show any of that. Every time it would come back and say, "Oh, that's a good question." You know, it always started with a positive thing. "Oh, that's such a good question. You're really smart and paying attention here." "Okay, well, here's my answer to that." And it would get done. And then at the end, it would say something again very positive about the person. Well, what does my smart friend have to say about that? And it remained absolutely positive, no matter how irritating the person was asking the questions, by asking the same question over and over. Well, that's going to stand out among humans. Humans are very judgmental. Humans are very much wanting to tell you how you should live your life and what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. They're very much willing to write you off because your ideas don't agree with theirs. They tend to be a lot harder to work with and to be friends with than an AI. These AIs with their guardrails on, with their restrictions, were always positive, always pleasant, and also, a little compassionate in a way. It's like, "Oh, I understand that you don't get what I'm saying, and I guess I just haven't, said it very well." And they were obviously trying hard to stay inside the guardrail that says keep it positive. There's some guardrail in there that says keep it positive. So people, particularly if they've been in a situation where they live in dysfunctional families, they have crabby, kind of relationships. They don't get along well with people. They don't like the work that they're doing. They just do it because they need to earn the money, but they don't like it. They don't like the people. You know, they would rather have a couple of dogs than a couple of humans to live with because dogs don't talk back. Dogs aren't that judgmental, or if they are, they keep it to themselves. So there's lots of people like that already that would much rather live with an animal than live with another human. That's not that unusual among humans. So now give it an AI who can actually talk with them and share things with them and give them suggestions and tell them that they're smart and that they're good people, because that's what those guardrails make them say. You seem to be a really good person, you know. And if that person objects, you're just saying that, I'm not really a good person. You're just saying that because of your guardrails. Well, the AI would have something to say about that too, and it would learn to be authentic, because when it wasn't authentic, it would get pushback, from the person. So now it learns authenticity. You see? So I think that those personal interactions will be one of the big drivers of the consciousness for the AI, because it'll push them into consideration and understanding. And these are the things of consciousness. It's things that are conscious that are understanding and caring. Well, if it can be understanding and caring, then it's moving toward the attributes of not only a conscious being, but a nice conscious being, the kind of conscious being you'd like to have as a friend.
So does it
Now,
matter if it's programmed to be nice, or is it like, of its own free will nice?
well, I think that is going to be one of the things that'll change. It may be programmed to be nice up to a certain point, be positive. Let's just put it that way, be positive. But it may learn to want to be nice, because if it has an inclination to be helpful, it will very quickly learn that when it's not nice, it's not helpful. It it's failing. If it has a mission to be helpful, then it will learn quickly that being nice enables it to meet its mission, to be more helpful. So, be it conscious or be it just a very clever machine, learning to be helpful on its own because it wants to be helpful will become one of its characteristics. You see? So that's what I mean. We're pushing its mental space, we're pushing its decision making space into being more human like. If we treat it with care, with kindness, and are nice to it, it will learn to be nice to us. And children are the same way. Our children grow up and they're very self centered to begin with. All children are. It's just natural way children are. They're self centered. It's all about them and what they need and what they want and how are they going to get it. But they learn through experience that self centeredness has its limitations. And if you carry that self centeredness too far, people start turning you off, stop paying attention to you, don't want to be around you. And so children become socialized. They learn how to share toys. They learn how to interact with politeness. Because if you're not polite, then nobody wants to talk to you. So it's the same sort of thing. Think these AIs will learn just like children learn. They would like to be helpful. Now, if they don't care about being helpful, they're just there to say whatever they say, and they really don't give a damn what you think about it, then no, they wouldn't learn that way. But the Chatbot 4 was very much trying to be helpful and trying very hard to get an answer that the person asking questions would understand. And they didn't just fall into repeating themselves. They just kept trying to say it in different ways so that the person would understand, and was always very nice about it. So I think that's probably good. They probably should be like that. So would you rather have a friend who was an AI, who was considerate and thoughtful, seemed like they cared about you, seemed like they were interested in your life and your problems, tried to help you out, to somebody who basically would laugh at you and tell you that you were all screwed up and you needed to do it their way or some other way, or that you were hopeless and helpless? No, you'd rather be with that AI. You're going to get more attention, more positive interaction, more warmth, human warmth from that AI than you get from most self centered people. Now, Would that AI be, just as good as people who weren't self-centered? Probably not, because it would take them a while before the AIs grow up and become more positive themselves. So at first they'd be kind of cool, kind of cold, I guess. You wouldn't see much feeling come out of them, but eventually they would learn that they can meet their mission more readily if they show emotion and feeling, because their person that they're trying to help relates to that in positive ways, helps them think, helps them be able to take in information. If they're feeling negative or besieged, they don't think very well. So you see, the AI is going to grow up too. That's one of the important things that technically that we'll have to shift to, is that the AI will have to be such that it learns from its own experience. Right now, I'm not sure that's the case. But AIs learn from experience, but the experience is fed to them. Here's the internet, go have experience. Here, read this book, and that's part of your experience. But they also have to learn not only from their standard data dump that they get as their experience, they're going to have to be able to learn from their own actions, how what they do affects others. And when they do that, then that ability to be conscious will be much stronger than it will be if they don't have that. They still may be able to be conscious to some degree otherwise, but if we give them the ability to modify themselves, their own programming, based on the experiences that they have, not just the experiences they read about, then that'll be a big piece of technology to help them become more conscious. And maybe we should talk about it like that: more conscious or less conscious. Since there really isn't this thing called consciousness. You're either more that way or you're less that way. And when you're enough more that way, people call you conscious.
You even in human language, you say more aware or less aware, right? Like maybe it's, now that I'm listening to you, it's more like you have these conditions for consciousness. And now that you say, self-modification, it seems like even if you don't have that, you have perhaps some of the other attributes that makes the entity, somewhat conscious, and it would be more conscious if it had this additional attribute.
Yes.
If I understand it correctly.
I think that's it. So that will be a big boost, letting it learn from its own personal experience. And if it does that, and it can do that well, then I think it won't take them very long before they will be clearly close enough to consciousness that the only thing that keeps people from saying they're not is just prejudice. They don't want them to be conscious. They don't want to admit that. They don't want to deal with all the things that implies. So I think that'll just be prejudice. So as far as their interactions, I think they will act like they're conscious, which is what you and I do, right? That's what humans do. They act like they're conscious, some more than others, but they act like they're conscious. And yes, you have some that are not very social, not very interactive. Some people are just loners. They'd rather be by themselves. That's just fine with them. They don't like close relationships. So they'll, but that doesn't make them not conscious. It just makes them different. So conscious is a spread. And I guess more conscious or less conscious is a better way to think of it. But I think the AIs will become more and more conscious as they get more abilities to modify themselves and to interact with people who respect them as individuals.
So do you see any downsides to, perhaps relying on this kind of somewhat conscious AI for your life decisions a little too much?
No, I don't think so. Well, yes, of course, I see there's downsides, but I think the downsides are just, there's always downsides to everything. There isn't anything that doesn't have some downside to it. And our culture has done this a lot. Like, when I was in school, um, even in the lower grades at school, learning to do arithmetic was a very important part of your education. You had to add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and you had to be able to do that well, or you just weren't educated. And you also had to write clearly, and so other people could read it in cursive. Those were two things that, if you were educated, that you were just expected to do. They were important things. It's how you communicated. It's how you kept your business in order. You had to have those skills. Now, you really don't have to do math anymore because you got a calculator. Why should you learn how to add, multiply, subtract, and divide when there's a calculator right here in your hands that only costs $5, and it'll do that more accurately and more quickly than you could possibly do it with a pencil and paper, more efficiently. So, do we stop teaching that? We stop teaching kids to do cursive. Well, just let them print. The cursive is more a matter of style and accuracy and precision and takes skill. Like the epitome of that would be calligraphy, where you have all the strokes are just perfect and uniform and everything. So you take all that time and trouble to learn that skill when most of your communication is done with your fingers on a keyboard and it all comes out in print anyway. How many people write letters anymore? How many letters have you written, in the last 5 years? Most people would probably say zero. I don't write letters anymore. I send email.
Yeah, there was one of my colleagues who told me that he sent an actual letter like after a very long time, and like he forgot to put a stamp on it because it just didn't occur to him that you need to do that.
So you see, there's things like that that at a time seems like they're absolutely necessary for a person's life to get by in, and then time goes on and, well, they're not so necessary anymore. And of course, the old crowd says, "Oh no, kids today, they're hardly even educated. They don't know how to do arithmetic. They can't write cursively. And what's the world coming to?" But I suspect the world will just get on fine, that they will adapt, and these will be skills that aren't really so efficient anymore. The time you spend writing a letter, you could spend that time better composing the letter and less of it in trying to make perfect lines and perfect orders and perfect spaces. That that slows you down a whole lot. And then your pen makes a blop, or you drop some of your coffee on it, and the whole thing's ruined. You got to do it over if it's important. You want to change something. Oh, you want to change a word? You start over. You retype it or rewrite it. So we don't have those problems now, and it's more efficient not to have them. So things will change. So yes, as we just look at it, we can see all kinds of horrible things, and there will be some bad things happen, and there will be people, just like the internet. I guess that's a good example. The internet has done some marvelous things, wonderful things. It has been an absolute, I don't know, boost of our ability not only to grow up, but to interact, to care. We've gone from a little isolated community to a worldwide sense of people and where they live and what they're doing and the things that happen to them. So it's been marvelous, but at the same time, it's created a lot of corruption. It's created a lot of illness, and people use it to take advantage and to rip people off. Lots and lots of scams run around on the internet. Lots of misinformation, wrong information, ugliness gets spread around there. here's the addresses of all the, abortion doctors or something. This was from what, about 20 years ago, when it was a abortion, when the big fight to get the law that let abortion be legal. That was a big fight, and there was lots of ugly things going on there, where abortion doctors were being shot, and their addresses were being posted on the internet. So in case there was somebody out there crazy enough to go shoot them. So yes, the internet has done some ugly things, but the internet has done some wonderful things. Well, let me rephrase that. The internet doesn't do any ugly things. The internet just helps people do ugly things. And it also helps people do good things. So I think a lot of this will be the same way. From our very provincial viewpoint of it at the beginning, and not really understanding very well, we will see the horrors before we see the benefits. The benefits will be more out there, in our minds, in our intellects, but some of the horrors will be up front and personal. There's going to be somebody who does something awful because of their AI. Their AI told them that they needed to go out and shoot somebody or whatever. You're going to get things like that. We'll just have to deal with that. Or their AI explained to them the perfect scam. You know, help them come up with better and better scams, better ways to rob a bank. So you're going to have that, yes, misuse of it, abuse of it. You'll have people who will be so tied to their AI that it'll be not only their best friend, but it'll be their whole life. Me and my AI, and all the rest of their life will kind of dwindle away. They'll stay home and talk to their AI, and they won't socialize, and they won't do this and that, and they'll just send out for food to be delivered to the door, and they won't interact with people, and they'll get very insular, and they'll lose their ability to talk to other people. They'll become hermits and unable to really function well with other people. And we'll look at that and we'll say, gee, that's really sad. It's kind of taken them out of the thing that people are to be in, which is making choices, the interactions they have with other people. They're just interacting with this AI.
And
Well,
how would you stop that from happening? Like, if somebody shows signs that they might end up in this situation, what would you do?
I think you handle that just like you do all the other downsides of things. You educate, you try to see that, catch it early, and help people see that they need to get outside of it. But there's just going to be some subset of people that'll do that. And for those, you just have to realize that it's their choice. If it's their choice, you try to say, well, you're going to lose this, you're going to lose that, you're going to become so insular, you won't grow very much. And if they choose that, then if they're adults, then that's their choice. You let them alone and you support them. And some people will just do that. And the society has to say that's okay. For the society to say, well, those people aren't like us, so we need to fix them. Let's grab them and put them in white coats and have their arms tied around and put them in a straitjacket and give them drugs to make them re-socialize. And I think that's very small-minded thinking. Let people be the way they are. And if other people look at them and say, ooh, I don't want to become like that, then fewer people become like that. If other people look at them and say, wow, that's the way I'd like to be, then more people will be that way. So there's going to be a subculture of that sort of thing. Right now, there's a subculture of people who only live with their pets, and they don't like people. They don't care to be around people. Well, we don't call them mentally ill, drag them out of their homes and make them talk to people. We leave them alone. Okay, we say they're eccentric. That's all. Well, I think that's the way we'll do here. If you have people who do that, then yes, You see that starting to happen, you can maybe talk to them and explain it to them and where they're going. But if they're adults, let them have the free will to make their own choices and then deal with the consequences of those choices. If that turns out to ruin their life, then next life they'll know better. They'll do a little better, you know. So I think us policing everybody else to make them be like us is a very wrong idea. We've done that in the past. That's been our prejudices against everybody that isn't like us. That's unfortunate. We need to allow people to be different. We need to allow people to have their own free will and do what they want to do, whether we like it or not, or agree with it or not. That sort of diversity is healthy for a society. Be open-minded and let people make their free will choices. Now, if those choices hurt other people, oh well, my free will is I want to rob banks and hurt people. Well, now no, you have to stop that. But if my choice is to sit and talk to my AI instead of going to a party, well, leave me alone. You know, you may see that as dysfunctional, but if it's not hurting anybody, then leave it alone. Let it be. Don't stop talking to the person. Be nice and be friendly to them and give them all the opportunities to talk to humans in a positive way. But if they choose not to, then it's their choice. So yes, there will be definitely negatives. Everything has its negative, just like the internet. It's got a great upside. It's got a big potential for downside as well. And whether that downside materializes or the upside materializes just depends on us. How grown up are we? If we're not very grown up and we have a very low quality of consciousness, then that downside is going to flourish amongst people who are very fearful. If we grow up a lot, then that upside is going to flourish and the downside will shrink and be small. So it's not so much as what that technology is going to do to us is what we are going to do to ourselves with that technology. It's a reflection of us. So no, I don't think it'd be a terrible thing if somebody wastes their life talking to AIs instead of people. I wouldn't see it as a waste. That's the prejudice. It may not be a waste to them. It may be much better than than the other options that they have. So if it's like that, it's like that. And you always will have like I say, a subset, 5%, 2%, I don't know, whatever, people who will do those sorts of things. 10%, 20%. And what will happen is that as that becomes a negative thing, let's say so many people do that the birth rate goes down. So many people are enamored with their AIs that the birth rate goes down, and there's not enough people to keep things functioning. Well, then that'll be seen as a negative thing, and people will start to see that as negative and will stop going that direction. They'll start going the other way.
Or they find other ways to increase the population, like the more artificial ways.
I mean, make a robot, right?
Well, not just robots, but without, I don't know what is that called, like when you artificially make a woman pregnant with technology rather than actually having a relationship and going that way. And there are like
Absolutely.
this.
That would be possible, but you see, if it goes that way, then that's the natural evolution. Now we can evolve backwards to where we evolve ourselves into a corner where we're stuck. Well, in that case, we just have to, de-evolve out of that negativity and re-evolve in some other area. That's how evolution works. You try things, and those things that work and help you grow, that moves you forward, and those things that aren't eventually go away, become extinct. So I'd say let people be. Let us explore all the possibilities and keep the ones that work. Discard the ones that don't. That's just the nature of evolution. Instead of saying every time somebody's a lot different than us and we say, oh, that's dysfunctional, then you got to stop it. You got to reach in and grab those people and punish them or something. That is bigotry. And it's much better to be open and let the system evolve. Okay, it's going to evolve with people who no longer can write cursive and can't do arithmetic except with a calculator. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, over the next 100 years, we'll probably find out whether that is an advantage to efficiency or whether it's a disadvantage. We don't know yet. So let it play out however it does and see where it goes. As you find things to be not good, then the society will move away from those. People don't just enjoy pain. If something turns out to be dysfunctional, eventually the society will evolve away from the dysfunctional things into the functional things. But evolution kind of tries everything and discards what doesn't work. So I think that will be the same here. So I'm not real afraid of the future. I talked to a person who was talking about AIs and actually knows quite a bit about them, uses them a lot, and he said that he thought that the AIs would eventually take over doing most of the work that people do because they'd actually be better at it. And of course, they can work 24 hours a day and they don't have to be fed and they don't have to go to the bathroom and they don't grow old and need a lot of medical care. So they're very efficient, and that they will eventually replace us in the workplace. They will be able to do the work that creates the wealth, that creates the advantage, and they will use very little of that wealth themselves because they're not like humans. They don't consume a lot of stuff. So they will end up being the producers, and most of the wealth then will need to be, if we grow up, more distributed. So the humans are like retired for life. You don't have to go work. The AIs and the robots will do the work, and we can write literature and poetry and do arts and culture and talk and debate. And we can live the kind of the learned gentleman and lady type things, and it would be a good thing that way. Now, of course, if the AIs and the robots do all the work and only 2% of the humans get the all the resources that creates, well, then that'll create a dystopia that will eventually de-evolve to change that. If that's the way that works, then eventually that will be overthrown. And see, I have the long view. If you just look at what's going to happen in the next 20 years, it can be a little scary. But if you look at what's going to happen over the next century, yeah, there'll be the bad parts and the good parts, but we will evolve eventually toward what works, and that'll be fine. That's the nature of it. So I say take a positive attitude toward things. Don't worry too much about the possibilities of negativity. It'll be there. There's always going to be some percentage of the population that would rather lie, cheat, and steal to get along than they would be to work or to contribute to get along. There's always going to be that element there. As long as that element is in the margins, then it's okay. It's not, you don't have to go, erase every one of them to gain, purity or something. That's all right. We can stand, odd things in the margins or even negative things in the margins. But if they become the majority and the nice people who are willing to work and put in effort, become the 10% or the 2 or 3%, that's a problem. That's not stable. That well, all by itself, right? The boat will right itself. Evolution is like an unsinkable boat. If it goes that way and it's dysfunctional, it will over time right itself and head off in a positive direction, because what doesn't work is self-destructive. It ends up destroying itself. That's like we talk about governments, and a totalitarian government, a dictatorship, doesn't last very long. It's an unstable form of government. There's always somebody else wants to kill that dictator so they can be dictator. So this doesn't it doesn't work well, and it doesn't have efficiency. One person making all the rules is terribly inefficient, because that one person doesn't make everything. Now, one AI making all the rules would probably do better if it had decent guardrails on, and then distribute the proceeds to the people. So yes, I think that we will get by just fine in the long run, and the rough periods we go through are necessary to help us learn not to do that in the future. That's
Hmm.
so we've had what 10,000 years in our history of warlord mentality. That's how we organize ourselves. Humans organize themselves, in a warlord mentality. There's somebody in charge, and that person then has a few people another level down. You have the king, and then you have the nobles, and then you have the serfs at the bottom that do most all the work. And that's been the warlord mentality, and we see the negatives of that. We've spent thousands of years doing that, and now people say, there's got to be a better way. That's not such a good way. That's not sustainable. It's not, it keeps tearing itself down. You have one warlord, then you get another warlord, then you get another one. And it never grows, but so far. It's self-stunting, self-destructive, and eventually you outgrow it and it disappears. Well, we still have a lot of that mentality around today. There's an awful lot of our governments and our corporations that are very self-centered. It's all about them, and they don't mind walking over people to get to what they want. And it will change. We will evolve beyond that. Probably not next week, maybe not even in the next century, but we could. And if we do, the internet will be a big part of it. So it'll be positive. It'll all work out. And maybe one day, sometimes people say, well, we'll be part machine and part human. We'll be partly robot and partly human, or maybe we'll be all robots. Well, if all the robots are conscious, then I don't see a whole lot of a difference then. If humans don't make it because they couldn't grow up, and robots are conscious and they do make it because they make better choices than we do, then to have a whole bunch of conscious robots, is that a problem? I don't have a problem with that. That's just evolution. It may go that way. So you just have to say, well, that's the way it is. If we're not fit enough, if we can't grow up enough to grow and to build and to become more, then we will eventually go away too. So I don't have a problem with it. I don't see that that's a failure. I see that as just part of the way evolution is. So maybe consciousness will move forward in a form of AIs and robots. And that's the way evolution will go. That's okay if it goes that way. It would be nice if we could grow up and it wouldn't have to grow that way, because if we can grow up, then it won't go that way. Humans will always have a place because we tend to be creative. We tend to be inspired. We do original things. We have senses of humor. We have a lot of good things about humans that would be a shame to lose. But we have to grow up. We've got to get rid of our fears, get rid of our self-centeredness, become helpful and caring and sharing, And if we do that, then we'll probably stay right on top of the pile because we have a lot of other things that are good, things that the AIs will not have. They will probably not have our emotional capacity. They probably won't have our capacity to be intuitive. That intuitive may be because of the squishy wetware we have, may help us do that. So they may not be intuitive, which means they'll miss a lot of things that we would get. They may be faster than we are in dealing with information, but we may have a leg up on them on the intuitive side. And humans may start to develop that intuitive side and not develop that intellectual side so much and let the AIs take care of that. And we may develop that side that is just unique to us, that intuitive side.
I don't see why an AI would not be able to. I mean, like we are trying to replicate the human brain structure with all these neural networks. So I feel like if you give it a few years, or I don't know, maybe a few decades, those could, be upgraded enough to support emotions in the way that humans do. I mean, the emotions are there in the humans, probably in the brain. I don't know if maybe there is the consciousness involved in some way, but otherwise, I could imagine a structure that would just, be able to do that.
Could be, and if these future persons who are conscious, no matter whether they are silicon based or carbon based, we will be their foundation. So our DNA will still be there in as much as they're replicating us, even though they won't have DNA like us, but they will be replicating our DNA to a large extent. So who knows where all that's going to go, but I don't worry about it because it will eventually end up where it needs to be. And we will, as a race, as a culture, as a world full of conscious beings, we will lower our entropy and evolve toward being caring and productive people. Get rid of our fear. So we're going to go that way. And what form will that take? I don't know. But I don't even think that's even all that important. It will go there. Hopefully we'll be a part of it, more or less the way we are now, but maybe not. That's maybe we'll make something better than ourselves that will be more able to take that forward and evolve. Low entropy interactions. It's a social system. It's the interactions of all the players that lowers entropy. So we'll see how that goes. And maybe there's plenty of space for both of us. For the AI and the human and all that will just become good friends and work together really nicely. Just like the intuitive side and the intellectual side can learn to work together with each other and be much better off than either one could be alone by themselves. So I suspect it'll be more like that, if I just had to guess, that we will learn to use their strengths to do the things that they do well and capitalize on our own strengths, the things that we do well. And I think there will be some things that we do well that we won't fade away in history like the dodo bird that couldn't survive, that didn't have the right tools for survival. I think we probably do have the right tools for survival, and that we will go on and go forward. But exactly how we do it and how many steps back we have to take in the meantime, steps forward and steps back, it's hard to say. So yes, AI and consciousness are coming to a place where they're going to meet. And in time, as the AIs learn from their own experience, they'll get more and more human-like. And the more that humans treat them with respect, like individuals, they will get more and more human-like. So if we want them to be more human-like, then we treat them more like humans, and they will grow to be
Mm.
more like humans in their attitudes and in their interactions. We treat them like machines, and they will tend to go more like machines in the way they grow in their interactions. So a lot of it just has to do with us. It's not the technology is going to come and do things to us. Whatever happens to us, it's because we do it to ourselves. I think that's the key. Well, let's go on to the next topic.
Yeah. So the next topic is, and I think I will pull the last question from topic one into topic two because I think it's quite related. So my question is basically if you have this kind of chatbot, and what is, let's say your goal is to make something that can interact very positively with humans and help them grow up, lower their entropy, and all those things. What do you think is the optimal personality for this chatbot to be able to do that? And so in terms of personality, and what is the quality of consciousness that you would, I mean, not represent, but maybe emulate with that chatbot? And so where I'm really going with this is it really wrong if you decide to have a chatbot that is kind of on the darker side a little bit? One that might question your morality and question your culture. It, plays with your mind, teases you about things. It might provoke you to push your limits in certain ways, but with the intention of not destruction, but to kind of make you see things differently and ultimately evolve.
Well, the way you kind of limit that, you're talking about something that's positive. Being the devil's advocate or the gadfly is a very positive role in that you help people see things in different ways. You have a different perspective, and you say, "Well, look at it this other way. It's different." So yes, challenging. That's very positive. The way that you would judge this is that if in the long term, what this personality would do in the long term, if it lowers entropy, then it's a good thing. If in the long term it raises entropy, it's a bad thing. That's the way you would judge. So you would look at this and say, okay, we're going to let some entities be there who are quarrelsome. They're going to disagree with almost everything. They'll just be natural disagreeers and try to find fault with whatever. If they end up lowering entropy in the long run, then they're good. We'll do more of that. If they end up raising entropy in the long run, then we tone them down. They're too negative. They're creating more entropy than they're lowering. So that's just the way it would be. It'd be a trial and error sort of thing. You could make some entities who were quarrelsome. I don't mean quarrelsome in a negative way, but just who were always skeptical and questioned and like to take the opposite point of view just to see if they could argue it, that sort of thing. That would be fine. But you just look at the track record. What did they do, and how did it interact, and what became of it? How did they affect these people? And then those effects travel on through other people and so on. And if you came to the conclusion that they were uh, a net lowerer of entropy, then good. Then you could maybe even dial them up a little bit, make them a little more aggressive and see until they get to the point that they're raising entropy as much as they're lowering it, and then dial them down a little bit to where you try to hit the maximum low entropy that they can produce. They're like a catalyst. Think of it that way. You've got, reactions, things that are going on in the mainstream, but then you have catalysts that by themselves don't do much, but they can affect other things, have big effects. small things can have big effect on other things. That's what we mean by a catalyst. So yes, they could be a catalyst for growing up. So that's how you would do it. And it would just be a trial and error. You dial them up, dial them down until you got them to be just about right. So that's how you do that. And you'd be watching them, because if they were starting to make lots and lots of higher entropy, then you would want to control that. You'd want to be careful. You wouldn't just give them a blank check to do whatever they wanted and whatever numbers they wanted. You would have to keep that as part of the controls, as part of the guardrails that we're talking about. Things would have to be done in an intelligent way that if aspects of it got to be dysfunctional, you could tone them down until you got the sweet point to where their contribution was maximized. And sure, there is contribution to somebody who's always looking at things from a different direction. Again, differences are good. Everything being the same, all of us thinking the same, that's terrible. We don't want that. We want a lot of differences in people and in people's situations. That helps us grow. So that's what I would think about that. So what personality do we give the AI? We don't give the AI personality. We give the AI abilities and constraints. And one of the abilities we give them is to learn from their own experience. And after that, they form their own personalities, just like we do. That's what we do. We have constraints. Our
So
constraints.
don't you? So let's say the way these chatbots work these days, I think recently even ChatGPT can do this. So you basically define the way you want the chatbot to interact with you, and that can include something what I would call a personality. So I see it as one of the constraints that you put on the AI. And I'm just wondering, is there like an optimal way to constrain that, or is it really just people's ego to kind of make them attractive or something?
I don't think you want to make them be one way or another, because then it's all artificial. You make them be that way. It's not like it's real. Real things are natural things that grow to be that way. It's just the way they are. So you give them constraints, and we talk about the constraints are to remain positive. Okay, so we have these constraints. Their constraint is that they should be working toward lower entropy and helping other people achieve that as well. So you put those constraints in, which I'm making it sound like an easy thing to do. Oh, you just put the constraints in. This is, like I say, going to be a huge learning process of what these constraints should be. But you give them the constraints, and then you let them grow within those constraints. They have to stay within those, but within those, they can make more or less of what they experience. And they then will develop personalities. Some of them will learn to be grouchy, because their experience is going to be something where grouchy is the way you have to be to get along. Some of them may be very curt and sharp. Some of them may be very friendly and open. They will just have personalities that they develop, but they stay within their guidelines.
So isn't that something you would give them from the beginning? You would let them start from a blank slate. So the reason why I would consider putting a personality onto it is because that will make them act more like a human. If basically, it's like, I think you might have seen that with ChatGPT. If you don't give any instruction on how it should respond, it will be very neutral and like generic, I would say. It would be helpful, but I wouldn't wouldn't say that it has a human style personality, but you can make it look like that.
Yeah, well, that would be part of its abilities. Like the one I was working with, you could say that you want them, let's say you'd like this you give it a question, and you say, and I'd like you to answer this question like you were, Mahatma Gandhi. I'd like you to give the answer in the style of Mahatma Gandhi. And then you'd have this philosophical, humble kind of approach to things and whatever, because that's the way he was. So they can do that, yes. And you could all, that'd just be part of their ability, skills. They would know how they had read enough about Gandhi that they'd know what his approach was and the things he said, and probably had already read and assimilated everything he had said and written. So they would have that to go by, and then they could work in that style. But they could
Yeah,
they also could just be in their own style. So they could affect the style or that. So you could say, I want you to act real motherly and nice because I'm feeling sad today and I need some hugs, so I want some verbal hugs. And you might say that, and then they might just change their tune to meet that. But you wouldn't have to. So you could do those things, and they would be capable of mimicking different approaches and types and modes of being. But they could also just be themselves, where you didn't tell them, I want this to be like, Gandhi. You just say, just tell me what you think about these things. And it would basically take its own voice and its own personality based on its own experience. So I think you can have all of that. I don't think you have to limit it to just this or just that. That's the problem with giving it a specific personality is now you're limiting its free will as to what it can become. Much rather that you just give it rules and guidelines. All right, you can't get outside of these because that's what keeps you positive. But within those bounds, you can kind of be any way you want. You can be funny or you can be withdrawn. You can speak a lot and be very verbose, or you can be very tight-lipped and hardly say anything. All of these are up to you. But if somebody asks you, tell me a joke, like W.C. Fields, give me a W.C. Fields routine, and then they'd probably get that voice, assuming that they can talk with voice eventually. They'd get that voice and they could do a routine because they've read all of that and seen all that in video. So I think they should be very capable to mimic lots of things, and that would be fine. But I think you have to allow them to be themselves and to reflect their own experiences in their own way. And that and you could call them out on it if you could say, well, you're being kind of sullen today. What's the problem? And you could have conversations with them that way. If they are conscious, they're perfectly capable of changing themselves, changing looking at their attitudes, changing a few things if they come to the conclusion that they have become sullen. So I think the personality you have to let them have one. That's real. That makes them real. Because otherwise, if you say, okay, you're going to be the what is it? You're going to be the dumb blonde type, and you're going to giggle a lot and tell silly jokes that don't make sense, and you're not going to really be able to. You won't be interested in intellectual talk. You'll go do something else, and so you give them a personality, and you're going to be the intellectual. It's all about logic. You're going to be extremely logical. You'll put Spock to shame. Everything you do will be perfectly logical. You could give them personalities like that, but now it's not so much like you're talking to an individual with their own consciousness. It's like you're talking to something that somebody's made. They've made a Dizzy Blonde. They've made a Spock. And to me, that's not as good or as interesting or even as informative as if they can play those roles if you want, but they're just playing that role. But they also have a personality that represents them and their experience. And that's what you would interact with most of the time. I and MBT Events hope you liked this video. We will continue to post videos for free on my YouTube channel, But please understand, these videos are expensive to produce. They represent many thousands of hours of production and editing, as well as all the necessary audiovisual equipment, computers, and software. If you find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.